Now in part 2, we detail how the federal government is using taxpayer money from the Department of Homeland Security's Terrorism Prevention Program to censor conservatives nationwide. Like the State Department before, the DHS is using the University of Rhode Island's Media Education Lab, the Rhode Island Lab, to accomplish its anti-American goals of training teachers to use censorship tools in the classroom and silence political dissent. Biden's DHS approved a 3-phase censorship strategy set to culminate close to the 2024 presidential election. DHS funded this endeavor through the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention (TVTP) grant program. MRC Free Speech America previously reported on this controversial program and how it has been weaponized to target Christians, conservatives, and the Republican Party. Phase 1 of this strategy was the launch of a public awareness campaign featuring DHS-commissioned blog posts attacking former President Donald Trump, MAGA supporters, Repentir Marjorie Taylor Greene, free speech, and the Second Amendment. The campaign also included controversial podcasts, panel discussions, and community events to generate support for censorship. The blog post portion of the campaign used incendiary language disparaging Biden's political opponents, all funded with taxpayer dollars. Examples include, "We are all living in a darker, scarier, angrier, less hopeful country thanks to Mr. Trump's influence. Are we on the verge of civil war?" Donald Trump was also adopting the shock jock style that Rush Limbaugh built into a cultural phenomenon, including his misogynistic and racist comments, conspiracy theories, and grievances. It won't be easy, but we really have to reduce Trump's influence. It's tempting and entertaining to tune into the circuses of the Marjorie Taylor Greenes, Louis Farrakhan's, Zick, and MAGA supporters. It turns out even Fox Media has limits on how much misogyny and racism it will tolerate from its stars. Witness the canceling of Tucker Carlson's show last week. Phase 2 of the strategy finances the current and ongoing nationwide expansion of the seminars initially established by the State Department. These seminars train educators across the country on how to divert students away from conservative ideas and media sources, skeptical of the administration's agenda. While these seminars are now closed to the public, it is highly likely that the same censorship methods introduced during the State Department-funded seminars continue to play a central role in the DHS seminars, since the same organizations continue to lead the effort. These tactics include pushing educators to put censorship tools from for-profit media ratings firms Ad Fontes and NewsGuard into American classrooms. It is telling that before being allowed to participate in DHS-funded seminars, educators must declare their political ideology. One teacher who declared herself conservative reported that she was confined to a breakout room controlled by the director of the Rhode Island Lab so as to limit her access to the most damning material. Phase 3 of the recently launched strategy provides cash prizes of up to $1,000 for children who create social media posts to increase demand for media literacy mandates, a euphemism for censorship. The program mimics the German socialist model introduced as part of the Rhode Island Lab's partnership with the State Department, which focuses on pushing teachers to turn children into media producers. To enhance this AstroTurf campaign, Biden's DHS selected the leftist lobbying group Media Literacy Now, which lobbies state legislatures for laws requiring media literacy. Media Literacy Now has a revenue-sharing agreement with Ad Fontes, a company that provides the media bias chart used to disparage conservative media. Because the two organizations also have overlapping board members and staff, they essentially function as a single enterprise. Inside the Biden admin's new strategy to censor and push leftist activism into American classrooms, a whole-of-society approach. That is the phrase the Biden administration uses to describe its plan to harness an interconnected alliance of public and private actors for the purpose of targeting its political opponents and turning children into left-wing activists. In part 1 of this report, the MRC Censorship Investigation Project detailed how President Joe Biden's State Department used the University of Rhode Island's Media Education Lab, the Rhode Island Lab, to push German censorship and indoctrination to American teachers. After this grant concluded, Biden's Department of Homeland Security, DHS, used the Rhode Island lab to coordinate with a vast array of domestic actors, from local politicians to left-wing activist organizations to a lobbying group to the American public school system. The DHS's program consisted of 3 phases. The first phase, which is concluded, consisted of propaganda work, ranging from podcasts to community events to blog posts that directly attacked and disparaged the Biden administration's opponents. The second phase, which is ongoing, is a turbocharged version of the State Department seminars detailed in Part 1. These seminars explained how to bring censorship tools and German activist techniques to American classrooms. The final phase, which has just launched, pays children up to $1,000 to create social media posts so as to increase demand for media literacy mandates, a euphemism for censorship. Phase 1 of this strategy was the launch of a public awareness campaign featuring DHS-commissioned blog posts attacking former President Donald Trump, MAGA supporters, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, free speech, and the Second Amendment. Phase 1 of the DHS project is its most sprawling, consisting of community events, a well-produced podcast series, a flashy website, and a series of blog posts. This strategy was consistent with the administration's whole-of-society approach, where private and public actors are seamlessly integrated into a unified whole. The DHS financed the Rhode Island lab with $700,000 awarded through the Targeted Violence and Terrorism Prevention (TVTP) program. MRC Free Speech America has previously reported on this controversial program and how it has been hijacked for left-wing advocacy. First proposed by the Obama administration to combat al-Qaeda's domestic recruitment efforts and later put on hold, the TVTP grant program was revived by a small number of DHS bureaucrats in 2019 who circumvented the White House budgeting process in the chaos after the ouster of Secretary Christian Nielsen. This quiet resurrection of TVTP was conducted by then-acting Secretary Kevin McAleenan after months of behind-the-scenes pressure by Miles Taylor. Taylor was the then anonymous author of the infamous New York Times opinion piece, "I Am Part of the Resistance Inside the Trump Administration." In that article and a follow-up book, Taylor, who had served as the chief of staff for the DHS, bragged about spending years working diligently from within to frustrate the mission and objectives of then-President Donald J. Trump. Taylor later told Politico he masterminded the TVTP revival and redesign against the direction of Trump's White House, which was not initially all that interested in funding the program. Scandal-plagued DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas called TVTP a priority of the highest importance, placing it under the Center for Prevention Programs and Partnerships, CP3. Mayorkas personally attended every session of a D.C. area meeting of TVTP grantees and bragged that under his leadership, CP3 has helped 143 different pilot programs get off the ground and flourish. One of those programs was Prevents OO in Dayton, Ohio, where the DHS directed TVTP funds to promulgate a pyramid of far-right radicalization, tying Christians, conservatives, and the Republican Party to militant neo-Nazis. When the Rhode Island lab, a part of the University of Rhode Island, a taxpayer-funded public university, petitioned Biden's Department of Homeland Security for TVTP money to promote media literacy and combat disinformation, it had a peculiar request. The Rhode Island lab proposed creating a program using the Media Literacy Now national network. As Part 1 of this report detailed, Media Literacy Now is a lobbying group, not an academic institution. It defines itself as an advocacy nonprofit dedicated to ensuring that media literacy is recognized by policymakers and the public as an essential part of K-12 education. Due to overlapping staff, finances, and revenue-sharing agreements, Media Literacy Now effectively functions as a single entity with the Rhode Island lab and media ratings firm Ad Fontes. Media Literacy Now requested to be the DHS grant's fiscal agent, the same role it had played when part of the project team overseeing the completion of the State Department grant detailed in the previous report. The Rhode Island Lab and Media Literacy Now used the TVTP grant money to begin Courageous RI, a media literacy program that, in its words, aims to mobilize RI residents with the skills to counteract the societal forces inciting intolerance, hate, and violence. Courageous RI is run by 2 people, Renee Hobbs and Pam Steger. The mastermind of the State Department seminars, Hobbs is both an advisory board member for Media Literacy Now and the founder and CEO of the Rhode Island Lab. Steger, meanwhile, is the Rhode Island chapter president for Media Literacy Now and the Rhode Island Lab's Director of Community Engagement. As detailed in the first report, Hobbs and Steger previously worked together for the State Department using media literacy to overhaul the Austin, Texas Police Academy. Once receiving their grant, the Rhode Island Lab and Media Literacy Now quickly activated the national network they had bragged about. Steger coordinated with the Rhode Island Department of State and Secretary of State Greg Amore, the Chief Elections Officer for Rhode Island. Amore had previously worked with Steger and Media Literacy Now on a media literacy bill when he was a state representative. As Secretary of State, Amore made the Department of State an official partner of Courageous RI and assigned his Associate Director of Education and Public Programs, Lane Sparkman, to ghostwrite Courageous RI's manifesto for Steger. This manifesto emphasized how political extremism, rage, and anti-government theories can lead to targeted violence and domestic terrorism. Sparkman then helped Steger and Hobbs plan Courageous RI's launch event. To thank Sparkman for her help, Steger sent Sparkman an offer to accept a $50 digital gift card paid for with taxpayer dollars as a small token of gratitude. Steger helped draft Amore's statements at Courageous RI's launch event, where the secretary proclaimed, "We have become so focused on individual rights, we have forgotten about the collective good." Another featured speaker at the event was Cranston Public Library Director Ed Garcia. Neither Hobbs nor Steger objected to Garcia using his speech to rant against a small but vocal minority relying on disinformation and fear tactics. Though he did not invoke its name, Garcia was seemingly referring to the Independent Women's Network, IWN, a women's rights group that advocates for school choice and against child sexual mutilation. IWN was forced to pay $1,200 in police security last year in order to host a dialogue at Cranston Library that was targeted by left-wing protesters, according to DailyMail.com. After IWN's event, Garcia temporarily banned outside use of our library space and thus future IWN assemblies. At the same time, he celebrated the hostile protesters for their stand against divisive and discriminatory rhetoric. The launch event, which was a packed in-person ceremony, was followed by a series of virtual follow-up events dubbed Courageous Conversations. These community events were structured to promote media literacy strategies for tackling propaganda, disinformation, and conspiracy theories in social media. In their events, Hobbs and Steger repeatedly reiterated that the entire Courageous Conversations were intended to be replicated across America so as to keep the conversation going, and that